All right, Clean Freaks, my name's Hank Balch. I'm in studio today for episode 19 of Hank versus the Robot, and I've got everyone's favorite sterile processing virtual resource, Sterile Simon, joining us on today's show to talk about a CVOR and everything you may want to know as a sterile processing professional about this service line. So welcome, Simon, to the show today.
Thank you, Hank. It's great to be here with you and all the Clean Freaks out there. I'm ready to dig into the CVOR service line and explore how it connects to the critical work sterile processing does every day. Let's keep things sharp and to the point. No dull instruments here.
Okay. Your puns just keep getting, I don't know if they get better or worse with each episode, but either way, here we are. Okay, let's start with the softball. CVOR, what do we mean and what does that entail? What kind of procedures are we talking about there, Simon?
Great question, Hank. The CVOR stands for Cardiovascular Operating Room, and it's all about procedures involving the heart and vascular system. We're talking open heart surgeries, valve replacements, coronary artery bypass grafts, CABG, and sometimes complex hybrid procedures like endovascular repairs. These surgeries are high stakes. Precision is everything, and the instruments sterile processing supports have to be spotless, functional, and ready for action. It's where life-saving meets next-level complexity.
All right, well, let's maybe start before we get into the procedures themselves, because I do want to spend the majority of the time walking through these different procedures and kind of getting some technical insight about what's going on during those procedures. But let's start with the CVOR staff themselves. Who is in the room when these procedures are going on? What's their background? What are the educational requirements?
The CVOR team is a powerhouse of specialized roles. At the center, you've got the cardiovascular surgeons, highly trained specialists in heart and vascular procedures. Supporting them, you've got the CVOR nurses who often have additional certifications like CNOR, Certified Nurse Operating Room, or even specialization in cardiac care. Scrub techs or surgical technologists are key players, handling instruments and ensuring the sterile field stays intact. They usually have formal training and certification, often focusing on cardiovascular specialties. Then there's the perfusionist. This is the person managing the heart-lung machine during procedures like bypass surgeries. Their role requires a master's level education and certification. Anesthesiologists or certified registered nurse anesthetists, CRNAs, are also critical, monitoring the patient's vitals and managing anesthesia tailored to these high-risk cases. It's a mix of advanced education, specialized training, and teamwork that makes the CVOR hum.
All right, that's great. I love that. On average, how long does it take for that CVOR surgeon to get the schooling if they need to operate independently?
It's a marathon, not a sprint for CVOR surgeons. After 4 years of undergraduate studies, they complete 4 years of medical school. Then it's on to a 5-year general surgery residency, followed by a 2 to 3 year fellowship in cardiothoracic surgery. That's around 15 years total, give or take, before they're operating independently. And many will pursue further subspecialization or certifications, which adds even more time. It's a serious commitment, but when you're working on the heart, there's no room for shortcuts.
Yeah, so you may not have access to this data, but about how much does it cost to get educated in the U.S. as a heart surgeon?
Becoming a heart surgeon in the U.S. is a significant financial commitment. Medical school tuition alone averages about $60,000 per year, totaling around $240,000 for 4 years. After that, a general surgery residency typically lasts 5 years, followed by a 2 to 3 year cardiothoracic surgery fellowship. While residents and fellows earn salaries, they are generally lower than those of practicing surgeons. Therefore, the total cost of education can exceed $500,000, not including living expenses and other fees.
Okay, well, there you go. I was curious about that, and I'll ask some more curious questions here along the way. All right, let's start by, pick a procedure that you'd like to talk us through in this service line. And remember, we're talking to sterile processing professionals who may be familiar with the instrumentation, but maybe not so much on how these instruments are used in the procedure. So start wherever you'd like.
Let's dive into coronary artery bypass grafting, better known as CABG, pronounced CABG. It's one of the most common procedures in the CVOR. The goal is to improve blood flow to the heart by bypassing blocked or narrowed arteries. From an SPD perspective, you're dealing with instruments like sternal saws for opening the chest, vein harvest kits, often for grafts taken from the leg, and delicate vascular clamps and scissors. During the procedure, the surgeon removes the graft material, typically from the saphenous vein in the leg or the internal mammary artery, and connects it to bypass the blockage. Precision instruments like microforceps and needle holders are crucial for suturing these grafts to the coronary arteries. Post-op SPD techs might see instruments that need immediate attention due to bioburden from bone marrow or tissue, making thorough decontamination critical to avoid cross-contamination in future cases. It's a procedure where every tool plays a life or death role.
About how long does the average CABG last, and if it's patient dependent, obviously tell me that too.
The longevity depends on multiple factors, including the patient's overall health, lifestyle choices, and the type of graft used. On average, vein grafts from the saphenous vein last around 10 to 15 years before they may narrow or become blocked again. Arterial grafts, like those from the internal mammary artery, are much more durable and can last 20 years or more. Patient-specific factors like smoking, uncontrolled diabetes, or high cholesterol can shorten the lifespan of the grafts, while maintaining a healthy lifestyle and following post-op recommendations can extend their effectiveness. It's definitely a case of you get out what you put in when it comes to longevity.
That's an interesting answer. Not necessarily the question that I was asking, but I'm glad you went that direction because I didn't know that information either on how long those grafts last. But specifically, I was asking, how long does the procedure itself in the OR, how long is that surgical procedure typically?
Got it. You're asking about procedure time. A typical CABG surgery takes about 3 to 6 hours, depending on the number of grafts being performed. Single bypasses are on the shorter end, while triple or quadruple bypasses take longer. The procedure also varies based on whether it's done with the heart stopped, on pump, using a heart-lung machine, or beating, off pump, which can slightly impact the duration. It's definitely a marathon surgery for the entire team in the CVOR.
Okay, great. Let's pick another procedure to focus on. What do you want to talk about next?
Let's talk about valve replacement or repair, another cornerstone of the CVOR. These procedures address issues like stenosis, narrowing of the valve, or regurgitation, leaky valves. They can involve either mechanical valves or bioprosthetic ones made from animal tissue, depending on the patient's needs. From an SPD perspective, you'll handle specialized instruments like valve sizers, annular cutters, and tissue forceps. For repair, there might be annuloplasty rings that require precise placement. If it's a minimally invasive procedure, you're looking at smaller instruments and potentially robotic components. These surgeries can last 3 to 5 hours, depending on whether it's a straightforward replacement or a more complex repair. Precision is critical, as even a minor misalignment of the valve can lead to complications. It's also fascinating that valve replacements are moving into transcatheter approaches, TAVR, which rely heavily on disposable devices but still require SPD involvement for any reusable components. It's a mix of old school surgery and cutting edge innovation.
Yeah, those TAVRs are definitely picking up. I mean, even back in 2011, 2012, I think they had begun doing some of those at the hospital that I was at in Louisville, Kentucky. Go back to the valve sizer instruments in particular. I've processed who knows how many of those in my sterile processing career, and I'm not exactly sure what they do with them in these procedures. So how are those valve sizer instruments used?
Valve sizers are a crucial step in valve replacement procedures. They ensure the new valve will fit properly in the patient's anatomy. During surgery, after the damaged valve is exposed, the surgeon uses these instruments to measure the exact diameter of the valve annulus, the ring-like structure where the valve sits. The sizers are often specific to the type of valve being implanted, mechanical or bioprosthetic, and they come in various sizes. The surgeon inserts the sizer into the annulus and gently tests the fit. This step is critical because an improperly sized valve can lead to complications like leakage or pressure issues post-op. Once the size is confirmed, the appropriate valve is selected and prepared for implantation. For SPD techs, it's essential these instruments are inspected meticulously, as any debris or residue could impact the surgeon's ability to get an accurate measurement. It's one of those tools that may seem simple during processing, but plays a pivotal role in the procedure's success.
Okay, great call out there. All right, so we talked about CABGs, we talked about valve replacements. What's next, Simon?
Let's move on to aneurysm repair, specifically abdominal aortic aneurysm, AAA repair. This procedure is a critical part of vascular surgery within the CVOR service line. It involves repairing a weakened section of the aorta to prevent rupture, which is often life-threatening. There are two main approaches: open surgical repair and endovascular aneurysm repair, EVAR. For open repair, the surgeon makes an incision to access the aorta, clamps it above and below the aneurysm, and replaces the damaged section with a synthetic graft. EVAR, on the other hand, is minimally invasive, using catheters and stent grafts inserted through the femoral arteries to reinforce the aortic wall. From an SPD standpoint, open repair involves large vascular clamps, needle holders for suturing the graft, and synthetic graft materials. EVAR introduces unique challenges, as it may include reusable guide wires, catheter handles, or stent deployment devices that require precision cleaning and inspection. This procedure can range from 2 to 4 hours, with EVAR typically being quicker. It's a fascinating example of how evolving technology impacts both the OR and sterile processing workflows.
Okay, AAAs, that's good. That's another one of those. I packed a lot of those case carts and not exactly sure what it was they were doing with them. So I just learned a thing or two there, Simon. I love this. Okay, what's next? Pick another procedure and let's give a spotlight on it.
Let's spotlight heart transplants, arguably one of the most dramatic and life-saving procedures in the CVOR. This is the ultimate team effort, requiring precision timing and absolute coordination between surgical, anesthesiology, perfusion, and sterile processing teams. The procedure starts with the recipient being placed on cardiopulmonary bypass to take over the heart's functions. The diseased heart is removed, leaving just the back wall of the atria in place. The donor heart is then sutured into position, with connections made to the atria, pulmonary artery, and aorta. Once the heart is in place, it's gradually warmed, and the surgical team hopes for the moment of truth, spontaneous heartbeat. From an SPD perspective, transplant kits are massive. You'll encounter everything from vascular clamps to specialized suture sets, and even devices for organ preservation and transportation. Cleaning and maintaining these instruments is critical, since the stakes couldn't be higher. One contamination issue could derail the entire surgery. These procedures can take 4 to 8 hours and often involve last-minute coordination, since the donor organ has to arrive fresh. It's high pressure, but one of the most rewarding surgeries to support.
This particular procedure there, Simon, made me think about a great category of conversation in this discussion, and probably future discussions if we continue going through these service lines, is the pioneers in some of these procedures. So maybe let's go back to the CABG. What were those early surgical pioneers in that particular procedure that you could highlight for us?
The history of CABG is filled with remarkable individuals who pushed the boundaries of medicine. The concept of coronary artery bypass surgery began gaining traction in the mid-20th century. One of the earliest pioneers was Dr. René Favaloro, an Argentinian cardiac surgeon. In the late 1960s, he performed the first successful CABG using a section of the saphenous vein to bypass a blocked coronary artery. His work at the Cleveland Clinic laid the foundation for modern bypass surgery and revolutionized cardiac care. Another key figure was Dr. Michael DeBakey, a legendary cardiovascular surgeon based in Houston, Texas. While he's more famously associated with vascular grafts and heart pumps, his contributions to cardiovascular surgery broadly influenced CABG's evolution. Dr. Mason-Sones also deserves a nod for developing coronary angiography, which allowed surgeons to visualize blockages and plan bypass procedures. These pioneers not only brought CABG to life, but also established techniques and technologies that continue to save lives today. Their work is a testament to the power of innovation and collaboration in the OR and beyond.
Yeah, we got the Favaloro retractors out there. We got a lot of DeBakey instrumentation, so those names are obviously huge. Talk to us about other pioneers in the valve replacement, in the AAA, and the heart transplant space.
Absolutely, Hank. The names in these spaces are like the Mount Rushmore of cardiovascular surgery. Let's dive in. For valve replacement, one of the biggest names is Dr. Albert Starr, who, along with engineer M. Lowell Edwards, developed the first successful artificial heart valve in the early 1960s. And so the Starr-Edwards valve revolutionized how valve disease was treated and is still a cornerstone in the history of cardiac surgery. In the world of a AAA repair, Dr. Charles Dubost was one of the first to perform an open aortic aneurysm repair in the late 1940s. Later, Dr. Juan Perotti made history in the 1990s by pioneering endovascular aneurysm repair, EVAR, a minimally invasive technique that drastically reduced recovery times and procedural risks. When it comes to heart transplants, Dr. Christian Barnard in South Africa is the trailblazer. In 1967, he performed the world's first successful human heart transplant. Barnard's work built on the experimental groundwork laid by Dr. Norman Shumway at Stanford, who is often called the father of heart transplantation for his contributions to the science and techniques leading up to the first transplants. These pioneers didn't just create procedures, they forged entirely new pathways for medicine. Their legacy lives on in the instruments, techniques, and outcomes that define the CVOR today.
I love that, Simon. Great information, and I'm really glad that we got into some of those pioneers. I'm going to have to remember to ask that question on these other service line interviews. Let's switch gears here and talk about the advent of robotics. Are we seeing robotics in this CVOR space? And if so, how are they being used? What's going on today? What's possible for tomorrow?
Robotics is absolutely making its way into the CVOR, Hank, and it's transforming how procedures are done. Today, robotic-assisted systems like the Da Vinci surgical system are being used for minimally invasive cardiovascular procedures. While CABG and valve surgeries are still largely open chest in many cases, robotics is carving out a niche in areas like mitral valve repair and atrial septal defect closure. The beauty of robotics in the CVOR is precision. The robotic arms allow surgeons to make micro movements with incredible accuracy, which is especially useful in delicate cardiovascular structures. These systems also enable smaller incisions, which means less trauma for the patient, reduced infection risk, and quicker recovery times. Looking ahead, robotics might expand into more complex procedures like multi-vessel CABG or even hybrid procedures combining open and minimally invasive techniques. There's also potential for integrating AI and machine learning to enhance surgical planning and intraoperative guidance. Imagine robots that can adapt in real time based on patient anatomy or even predict complications before they happen. For SPD, robotics adds a layer of complexity. These systems involve reusable instruments that require meticulous cleaning, testing, and assembly. Any mishandling could compromise a procedure. So the future of robotics in the CVOR isn't just exciting, it's an opportunity for SPD to stay at the cutting edge of care.
Yeah, well, we want to be there, and we want to support advancement in medicine. I just want to use this opportunity to call out to our administrators that are listening. Hello, administrators. If you want to keep your OR cutting edge, you got to keep your SPD cutting edge, because we're the ones that all these complicated instrumentations are coming down to. And if we're not getting investment in technology and support and process improvement, it's going to break that chain in a very bad way when it comes to the patient on the bed in the OR. All right, Simon, before I let you go, I got one more question that came to mind about pacemakers. This is another one of those things, like as a kid I learned, hey, so-and-so has a pacemaker, and it's something to do with heart and like computer chips or something, but I don't know. Please inform me, what is a pacemaker? What does that procedure look like in the OR? And then we'll move to a close.
Great call out to the administrators. Hank, SPD is truly the backbone of these advancements. Now, pacemakers, a fascinating and life-changing technology. A pacemaker is a small device implanted under the skin, usually in the chest, that helps regulate abnormal heart rhythms or arrhythmias. It sends electrical impulses to prompt the heart to beat at a normal rate when it's too slow, bradycardia, or irregular. The procedure to implant a pacemaker is minimally invasive and usually performed in a specialized OR or cath lab. The surgeon or cardiologist makes a small incision near the collarbone and threads insulated wires, leads, through a vein into the heart. These leads are positioned in the heart's chambers and connected to the pacemaker device, which is then placed in a small pocket under the skin. Once it's all set up, the device is programmed to match the patient's needs. For SPD, the role here is indirect but critical. While pacemakers themselves are disposable and prepackaged, the procedure still involves reusable instruments like lead introducers, tunneling tools, and suture kits. Ensuring these are pristine and ready to go is non-negotiable for patient safety. It's amazing to think how such a small device can take over such a vital function for the heart. And with advancements in technology, we're even seeing leadless pacemakers and devices with remote monitoring capabilities. The future is exciting, but as you said, it's only as strong as the team, and SPD is the linchpin.
All right, Simon. Well, terrific episode today. Really appreciate your time and insight. And something tells me we're going to have you back to talk about additional service lines beyond the CVOR. But yeah, thanks again for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Hank. It's always a pleasure to join you and the SPD community to dive into these critical topics. I'll be ready and waiting when it's time to tackle the next service line. Until then, keep things clean and cutting edge, both in the OR and SPD. See you next time.
All right. Well, that was Sterile Simon. You're listening to Hank versus the Robot. New approach, new topic, new category that we took today, diving into one of these surgical service lines. I absolutely loved it. I learned a ton, as you can probably tell. And let's just keep going with some service lines here for a while, see how much information we can glean from Mr. Simon himself. If you're not already following Sterile Simon on LinkedIn, go track him down. Just go to LinkedIn, in the search bar, go for Sterile Simon, and you can catch him. He's mainly talking about endoscope education, a lot of ST91 style content out there these days, but I'm sure he'll end up talking about all kinds of different reprocessing content and information over there. Go give him a follow. Let him know that you appreciate him, as I know I do. And don't forget to follow us on our Beyond Clean YouTube channel. If you're listening to these podcasts on LinkedIn or on Facebook or even on X, that's great, but it could potentially be a little hard to go back and find old episodes. The best place to do that is on our Beyond Clean YouTube channel, and there's a playlist for Hank versus the Robot. I haven't said this in a couple of episodes, but I want to remind you, we're paying very close attention to the comments on the show. We'd love to hear if you're getting value out of these discussions, what questions you have about the content that we've already discussed, what potential ideas for future episodes that you want to throw out there. We are here, and the reason that we're doing this series is to educate you, the listener, in sterile processing. So we really value feedback. We are paying attention to comments anywhere we see them, through YouTube, through LinkedIn, through Facebook, even through X. If you want to shoot us an email, you can track us down at info@beyondclean.net. And if you do appreciate what you're learning, obviously we'd love to have you share the content to your network, especially if you get into this service line, like little mini series within a series. It'd be great to maybe share this with your education team, even maybe during staff meetings. Y'all can listen to one of these episodes and learn alongside me about all these wonderful service lines that we support as clean freaks in our departments. Okay, I'm going to wrap it there today. I want to thank you all for listening again. I want to thank Sterile Simon for joining us in studio, and remind you, like we do each and every week here at Beyond Clean, to keep fighting dirty. Thank you.